In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 college basketball games happening on March 4th, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Stetson versus Eastern Kentucky. This ASUN tournament matchup in Jacksonville feels like someone held up a basketball mirror. You see two teams with almost the exact same story on paper, both around that 11-20 overall mark and 7-11 in league play, both leaking points, both living on the edge of chaos, yet only one of them actually seems comfortable there. Eastern Kentucky has spent the season playing like the driver who sees a yellow light and treats it as a personal challenge. They push pace, they attack early, and they do not spend much time worrying about how pretty the possession looks as long as it keeps the pressure on. Their games sit up in that 80-point scored range with just a bit more allowed, so you get a profile that is all gas and very little break, while Stetson lives in the lower 70s on offense and still allows around 80, which makes them look a little more like a passenger when the game starts tilting into a track meet. The recent meeting between these two kind of told the story in one night. Eastern Kentucky turned that home game into a run and gun session and hung 100 on Stetson in a 100-88 win, and it felt more like a high-level pickup run than a slow, grinding conference showdown, which is exactly the type of environment the Colonels are built for. Shift that same style onto a neutral floor at UNF Arena in an elimination setting, and their identity does not suddenly change. The jerseys across from them might, but the way they play travels, especially when nerves kick in and every team reverts to what it knows best. Stetson has actually been the more reliable spread team over the full season. They sit around 16-11 against the number, while Eastern Kentucky is closer to 11-18. But a lot of that Stetson success came from quietly catching points and exceeding modest expectations rather than walking in as a clear bully that can create separation on demand. When you lay all that out, the high pace that lets runs pile up in a hurry, a bit of an edge on the glass, and an offense that can snowball when it starts hitting in bunches, Eastern Kentucky just looks like the side more likely to turn a close game into one that lands comfortably on the right side of the spread by the final horn. As our first pick for this matchup, the Eastern Kentucky Colonels to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Both teams treat defense a little like a polite suggestion. Eastern Kentucky games float around a combined total near 161 points, with something like 80.4 scored and 81.5 allowed, and Stetson contests sit just below 154 total, with roughly 73.5 on offense and 80.2 given up, so their normal environment already lands you in that mid-150s neighborhood before you even sprinkle in tournament nerves. Their last meeting is the perfect snapshot. They sailed way past the sort of totals you usually see in this league with that 100-88 explosion, and it was not some wild double overtime thriller. It was 40 minutes of pace, space, and a kind of unspoken race to see who could finally string together 2 stops in a row. Recent form keeps nudging the story in the same direction. Over the past month or so, Eastern Kentucky games have cleared 130 points in roughly 2/3 of their outings, and Stetson has been living in that 140-plus zone at a similar clip, which is another way of saying neither team is dragging many opponents into ugly, muddy rock fights right now. Tournament basketball usually adds a few extra ingredients to the scoring pot too. More whistles leading to more free throws, shorter prep time that leaves defensive game plans a little thinner, and coaching staffs that have already leaned into offense all season rarely decide to slam on the brakes when the bracket is on the line. So you end up picturing another night where the scoreboard operator gets almost as much of a workout as some of the bench guys. Put that all together, the season-long scoring profiles, the recent trends, and the way their first meeting turned into a track meet, and it is hard to shake the feeling that this rematch is set up to land in another high-scoring window where the total has a real chance to get pushed past by the combined firepower rather than held down by late-game nerves. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Creighton versus Butler. Hinkle Fieldhouse on a weeknight in March feels like a pressure cooker for everyone involved. You can almost hear coaches aging by a few years every media timeout. Creighton comes in with the profile of a team that has not quite figured itself out on the road, while Butler looks like the group that feels much more comfortable in its own building, with that home rhythm, same rims, same routines, same students yelling the same things every game. That contrast matters in a matchup like this because some teams carry their identity with them everywhere, and some teams leave a little bit of it back at the airport. Odds makers are treating Butler as a modest home favorite here, not asking them to steamroll anybody, just to be the steadier side in front of their own fans. That kind of number tells you this is less about a huge talent gap and more about who can handle the details better, who can get a stop after a timeout, who can squeeze one more efficient possession out of a late clock set. Honestly, that is the exact kind of spot where a confident home team tends to feel a little bigger than the visiting roster on paper. Creighton has shown flashes that are absolutely real, with stretches where the offense looks smooth and the ball zips from side to side, but the same group has also walked into gyms and been punched in the mouth early, never really recovering. That blowout loss where the shots would not fall and the turnovers piled up is the sort of thing that stays in the back of a bettor's mind, because it exposes a floor that is lower than you would like for a team catching a tough road assignment. Here is the thing, when a team leans heavily on perimeter rhythm and confidence, nights can swing wildly, especially in a hostile arena where one cold stretch turns into 5 empty possessions and a crowd that suddenly sounds twice as loud. Butler, on the other hand, leans into a style that tends to hold up when games get tense. They spread the floor, they attack the paint, and they are not shy about living at the free throw line, which is a very grown-up way to control a game when whistles tighten up late. It is not just about highlight plays, it is about stacking trips where you either score at the rim or walk to the stripe, while your opponent is trying to live off contested jumpers on the other end. That is the stuff that wins conference grinders in March, even if it does not always go viral on social media. There is also a little emotional wrinkle here, since Butler already went to Omaha, played Creighton tough, and still walked out with a narrow loss that stings just enough to be memorable. They covered the number that night as a road underdog, which quietly tells you they matched the physicality and execution pretty well, even on someone else's floor. Now you flip the script, drop the rematch into Hinkle, hand Butler the favorite tag, and you have a spot that sets up like a slow burn revenge story. Models that marry team strength with current form have been tilting toward Butler in this kind of setting, and casual fans scrolling betting apps are often landing on the same side for a simple reason. The Bulldogs feel more trustworthy across two halves at home than a Creighton group that has not always traveled well. Let me explain. When you combine the stronger home body of work, the proven comfort level in this building, the memory of that close loss the first time around, and the idea that the spread is not asking Butler to do anything superhuman, you get a very clear lean for who is more likely to cover. As our first pick for this matchup, the Butler Bulldogs to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Creighton tends to live in that space where they score in the mid-70s or better when things are flowing, but they also give up a similar range on the other end, which is usually a signal that their games tilt toward trading baskets rather than long defensive clinics. It is the classic high variance profile. When the shots are falling, they can hang a big number, and when they are not, they still often play fast enough that their opponent ends up scoring freely. Butler plays with a different kind of swagger on offense, one that leans into attacking closeouts, getting downhill, and turning pressure into trips to the line. Their typical scoring output sits in that high 70s to low 80s neighborhood, and they allow plenty of points as well, which means their box scores rarely look like rock fights. If you have watched them across the season, you know their games often feel like they are naturally drifting toward high totals without needing anything crazy to happen. When these two programs share the floor, the trend has been pretty straightforward. Recent meetings have featured Creighton putting up something in the mid-80s on average, with Butler not far behind in the high 70s, and the combined scores landing in a range that would make any over-better smile. That matchup in Omaha where the final score climbed into the high 80s for one side and mid-80s for the other is a perfect snapshot. Neither defense ever really slammed the door, and both offenses kept finding answers. Stylistically, it makes sense. Creighton is content to let it fly from deep, putting up a healthy volume of three-point attempts every night and knocking down enough of them to stretch defenses. Butler is not exactly shy either, mixing in their own threes with that steady diet of drives and free throws. On the defensive side, neither team has consistently shut people down, both allowing totals in that mid-70s range, which suggests that clean looks and open floor chances will be there. Late game scenarios matter for totals, and this matchup feels ripe for the kind of finish where both sides are still within reach in the final minute. That is usually when you get the extended possession game, intentional fouls, extra free throws, and maybe a rush 3 or 2 that push a game from lively scoring to genuine track meet territory. Honestly, unless there is a surprise injury wave that guts one of these offenses before tip-off, everything about the way these two have been playing points toward another night where both teams push into high numbers again. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Marquette versus Providence. This matchup feels less like a quiet conference game and more like a personality check between two different brands of chaos. Providence treats every possession like it comes with a bonus prize, playing fast, pressing the issue, and happily turning the floor into a scoreboard shootout when they get rolling. They arrive sitting at 14-15 overall and 7-11 in league play, but that record is a lousy storyteller for how they have looked lately because 3 straight wins against familiar league foes have them walking into this one with some real swagger. One of those wins featured them lighting up Xavier for 94 points. Another came from a gritty road grind in Omaha, the kind of game that usually exposes teams that are just front runners rather than fighters. At home, the building only adds fuel. This is a late-season matchup in their own gym. Fans know the stakes, the students know it is one of the last big chances to get loud, and that energy tends to reward a team that already leans into emotion and pace. They also have that little extra spark from the memory of the first meeting between these two, that wild overtime game on the road that turned into a track meet on hardwood, where they came up a single point short in a 105-104 heartbreaker. Games like that stick in the mind, for players and coaches and even for bettors who watched it unfold. Marquette shows up with a very different story, a season that has felt more exhausting than exciting. Their record sits at 10-19 overall with a conference mark in the 5-13 range, and that gap between expectation and reality has been one of the louder disappointments around college hoops this year. Their philosophy of staying away from the transfer frenzy has left them pretty thin in some key spots, especially inside, and that shows up in the box scores where they get pushed around on the glass and give opponents second and third looks far too often. They score in the mid-70s per night, give up a little more than that, and regularly lose the rebounding battle by several boards, which is a bad recipe when you walk into a physical, amped-up road environment against a team that already wants to run you into the ground. Their most recent outing was a rough watch, a low-scoring loss to DePaul where the offense sputtered and stalled and never really looked comfortable. That was part of a stretch with far more losses than wins, and you can almost feel the confidence leak when things get tight, especially away from home. Providence, on the other hand, has been stringing together this little surge while dealing with a short bench, nagging injuries, and the lingering shadow of suspension drama, yet the scoring has stayed up and the effort has not dipped. When a group keeps producing like that while juggling all those headaches, it usually points to a locker room that is locked in and a coaching staff that has the message landing. So when you mix a high-energy home crowd, a style that naturally stretches margins, a clear edge on the boards, and an opponent that has struggled to keep games within reach on the road, the picture slowly tilts in one direction as the matchup plays out in your head. The spread here does not require some historic blowout, just a performance where the stronger current form actually shows up for most of the 40 minutes. As our first pick for this matchup, the Providence Friars to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Providence makes the case for a high-scoring game all by itself, living in the high 80s on the scoreboard on average while letting opponents live pretty comfortably in the 80s too. They play with pace, they hunt early offense, and they are perfectly comfortable with a possession count that makes old-school coaches nervously check the shot clock. The first meeting between these teams is the obvious memory that jumps into everyone's mind, that overtime thriller that finished with both sides over the century mark. When you have that kind of recent history, it is easy to just assume the sequel will look the same, like a streaming show where every episode follows the same script. But Marquette quietly pulls the rhythm in the other direction. Their scoring sits in the mid-70s. They allow opponents to land in the mid to high 70s. And their issues on the glass mean they sometimes spend long stretches trying to survive defensive possessions instead of running back the other way. That shows up in those ugly, grinding games they have played lately, like that low-scoring loss to DePaul where the offense never really found a groove and the total ended up nowhere near a track meet. Their profile has more nights where both teams get stuck in the mud, with long scoring droughts and half-court sets that eat up the clock. Now layer in the late-season context, where rotations shrink, guys are banged up, and coaches lean more on control than on chaos. Providence has been working through a thin rotation, with a guard shelved for the season with a knee issue, a wing dealing with a concussion absence, and a forward just coming back after serving a 3-game suspension, so the temptation to lean a bit more on patience and structure is real. When depth is stretched, you do not want a wild game with endless trips up and down the floor. You want smarter possessions, some use of the clock, and a bit more discipline on defense so you are not constantly playing from behind in transition. In a spot like this, with emotion high and legs a little tired, scoring often starts hot, then cools as shots get shorter and decisions get more cautious. For the projected number to be cleared, both offenses would need to stay sharp and efficient almost the entire way, with very few wasted trips and very few of those stalled-out stretches that have been common this season, especially for Marquette. A more realistic shape feels like a game where points come in bunches here and there, but the overall total lands a touch lower than memories of that first wild meeting might suggest. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. California versus Georgia Tech. Cal walks into Atlanta with something real hanging over this trip, while Georgia Tech leans more on pride, home court, and that spoiler energy fans secretly love. Cal sits around 20-9 overall and has been hanging near the cut line for the tournament, so this kind of road test against a 10-18 Georgia Tech team that is 2-14 in league play feels less like a casual visit and more like a do not mess this up business trip. Honestly, that kind of pressure can tighten a team up, but it can also sharpen focus, and Cal has mostly leaned toward the second side of that coin this season. Georgia Tech, on the other hand, drags in with a long losing streak in conference action, and that wears on a locker room. You can play hard, you can compete, you can hear your coach talk about trusting the process, but when the scoreboard keeps going the wrong way, confidence leaks out a little at a time. The Yellow Jackets have worn that close but not quite label in a lot of spots, where they hang around against better teams and then just cannot finish the last 4 minutes. These two already gave us a preview in Berkeley, where Cal pulled out a 90-85 win. Georgia Tech showed it could hang as a clear underdog in that one, pushing Cal far deeper into the game than a comfortable favorite really wants. That first meeting told us something simple but important. These teams are not living in different weight classes, but when it came time to close, Cal had more answers, especially in the half court and at the line. The market still respects that gap, with Cal going on the road and still being treated as the stronger side rather than a coin flip. That in itself says a lot. When a team is away from home, in a strange gym with a student section in its ear, and still gets the nod as favorite, it usually means the profile travels. For Cal, that profile is built on a steady offense that scores in the high 70s on average and a defense that, while not perfect, holds teams in the low 70s and makes you work. Shooting is the heart of it. Cal sits in that top group nationally in three-point percentage, knocking down a healthy clip around the high 30s, and that stretches a defense until the closeouts get a step late. They also cash free throws at a rate most coaches would happily print on a t-shirt, around the upper 70s, which matters a ton in close spreads where the last minute turns into a parade to the stripe. Georgia Tech, by contrast, gives up close to 78 points per game and has a tough time consistently running shooters off the line, which is a bad mix against a team that already wants to spread you out and fire. Injuries tighten Cal's rotation, but do not flip who they are. Brightus Petritus is done for the year after leg surgery, so you mentally cross him off the board rather than wondering if he is a game-time surprise. On the perimeter, names like Dai Ames and Justin Pippen sit on the active list and are not flagged in major injury reports, so the expectation is that they roll. Stephon Marbury II and freshman wing Giovanni Ruff fall in that great questionable with undisclosed issues bucket, which coaches love about as much as you love a spinning wheel on your streaming app, so Cal has to be ready with and without them. Georgia Tech deals with its own bumps and bruises. Freshman big Muhammad Silla along with wings Davy Remigan and Dylan Thompson are all tagged as questionable, with Silla's situation tracing back to ankle trouble that already cost him time earlier in the season. The rest of the core, including Lamar Washington in the backcourt and Baye Ndongo in the frontcourt, is expected to go, and that group has to carry a heavy load against a focused visitor. It sounds like Georgia Tech is too wounded to compete, but that is not quite true. It just means their margin for error shrinks, especially late, when tired legs meet a team that lives at the foul line. Put all of this together and you get a fairly clear picture. Cal owns the cleaner season story, stronger efficiency on both ends, and a recent head-to-head win. Georgia Tech brings effort but also a track record of fading in closing time. In spots like this, the favorite that shoots it better from deep and finishes possessions at the line usually stretches a one-possession sweat into a more breathable result for anyone holding their ticket. As our first pick for this matchup, the California Golden Bears to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Cal games average about 78.7 points scored and 72.7 allowed, which lands you around 151.4 total points on a typical night. Georgia Tech sits in a similar neighborhood, with roughly 74.1 scored and 77.3 given up, again right around that 151.4 combined mark. So even before talking about styles or lineups, you are looking at two teams whose normal game already lives in a pretty healthy scoring band. That first meeting in Berkeley told the same story. It ended 90-85, so that is 175 points on the board. It was not one of those slow burn games where things only pick up in the last 5 minutes. Both teams found rhythm, both kept attacking, and the pace never really sagged. If you zoom out a bit and look at recent clashes between these programs, Cal has been up around 82.0 points per game and Georgia Tech around 77.3, which is about 159.3 combined, and that leans toward higher totals more often than not. Here is the thing, the numbers are one part, but the style is what really gives this matchup its flavor. Cal likes to play with space, push in transition when it is there, and then flow into actions that end in threes or drives to the rim. Top-tier three-point accuracy and frequent trips to the stripe are not just nice bullet points, they are engines for scoring. Every made three is a mini run by itself, and every whistle on a drive stops the clock while points go up, which is exactly what people who like high totals quietly root for. Georgia Tech's defense has not exactly been a fire blanket. Allowing around 78 points a night and struggling in multiple shooting categories means opponents get clean looks more often than a coaching staff would like. Perimeter coverage can be late, closeouts can be a half step short, and that is all an offense like Cal's needs to string together 10 points in a couple of minutes. Even on rough nights, Georgia Tech's offense usually finds its way into the mid-70s, so you rarely see them in rock fights unless the game completely stalls. The Yellow Jackets still have weapons. Lamar Washington can initiate and create, and Ndongo can crash the glass and turn misses into second chances. And when they have at least one of their bigger bodies like Silla or Peyton Marshall available, they can pound the paint enough to keep the scoreboard moving. If one or more of Silla, Remigan, or Thompson is limited or out, that often pushes them into smaller lineups that can be quicker and more aggressive on offense but a little more vulnerable on defense. That trade-off often helps the total more than it hurts it because you get more possessions, more driving lanes, and more mismatches. Late in the season, tempo also comes from mindset. Cal wants to lean into what it does best on offense and put something attractive on film for the committee, and that rarely means slowing things down and grinding every trip. Georgia Tech, playing in front of its home crowd with little to lose, can afford to be loose and let guys fire when they feel it. Anyone who has watched March hoops knows how quickly things snowball when both sides are comfortable letting it fly. And then there is the closing stretch. If the game stays relatively tight, you get intentional fouling, quick possessions, and a lot of free throws, all with the clock stopping every few seconds. If one side pulls away, you can still get garbage time buckets from bench units trying to make a case for more minutes next season. The only real path to a lower scoring result is if both coaches suddenly decide to turn this into a slow, half-court rock fight for 40 minutes, which would go against almost everything these teams have shown this year. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Miami, Florida versus SMU. Miami and SMU get a matchup that feels like it should be played in prime time, even if it sneaks onto the schedule like a quiet little gift for bettors. A ranked Miami group, sitting around 23-6 overall and 12-4 in league play, walks into Moody Coliseum to face an SMU side closer to 19-10 and 8-8 in conference. Yet the market still tilts toward the home team as the slight favorite, which already tells you how much respect that building and that crowd have earned over time. You get this classic situation where the flashy home court energy is priced in, while the quieter part of the story, the road toughness of the visitor, is still offering a bit of hidden value. Miami has basically flipped its identity in a short span, going from a messy, frustrating outfit to a group that actually looks like it knows exactly what it wants to be on both ends of the floor. The offense is smoother, possessions feel more purposeful, and they do not panic the first time a hostile crowd gets loud. On the road this season, they have walked into a lot of charged buildings and walked out looking composed, and that kind of repetition matters more than one flashy blowout win at home. You can almost feel that veteran vibe when they get punched early, they bend, they do not break, and by the under 4 timeout in the second half, they are still right there. SMU on their home floor is a different sort of animal entirely, which is why the books lean their way first. The gym gets loud, they like to play with tempo, and when they get rolling early it can feel like a snowball that just keeps growing. But the flip side is just as important. Their style leaves room for swings. They can give up runs, they can get a little loose with shot selection, and in recent stretches they have shown that tendency to let teams hang around instead of putting a firm lid on things. That is entertaining for neutrals, but it is not always comforting when you are laying points and asking that same team to close the door cleanly. On the betting side, Miami has generally treated backers decently, covering often enough that you feel like you are not chasing fool's gold, while SMU has had more of those frustrating nights where the win column and the ticket window do not line up. The Mustangs still draw respect because of the home court, the name, and the style, but the market has leaned their way a touch too often, and you can see it in those against the spread patterns if you have been tracking them week to week. Honestly, when you strip away the noise, what you are left with is a ranked, battle-tested team that owns the better overall record, carries the sturdier defensive profile, and has already proved it can perform in tough environments, all while getting points against a good but wobblier home favorite. Here is the thing, SMU's plan of simply overpowering visitors with pace and shot-making runs straight into one of the few teams on their schedule comfortable playing that way while also tightening the screws when possessions get heavy late. As our first pick for this matchup, the Miami Hurricanes to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Both teams lean into tempo, they are not shy about early offense, and neither staff is looking to turn this into a walk-it-up, grind-it-out kind of game. You get that feeling of a track meet waiting to happen, where a couple of quick threes or a flurry of transition buckets can flip the whole rhythm in 60 seconds. Miami has settled into an identity built on clean looks and efficient trips. They are not just firing up wild shots, they hunt good ones and hit them at a solid clip. Their games have a habit of creeping into higher scores because they are comfortable playing into the 80s when the opponent invites it. Even when they win or lose by single digits, the total number of points on the board often looks like something from a pickup run where nobody wanted to sit. SMU lives in that same neighborhood, maybe even pushes it further at times, especially in that home building where the crowd feeds every run. They are perfectly happy trading baskets, and their defense, while capable, is not exactly a brick wall that smothers games into slow, low-scoring rock fights. You see plenty of possessions where a decent contest is still met by confident shooting, and that sort of rhythm usually tilts games toward the higher-scoring side of things. Late-season college hoops adds another layer. With seeding, resumes, and momentum swirling in everyone's head, you end up with longer endgames, more fouls to extend things, and coaches squeezing every last second out of the clock. Those final 2 minutes can feel like their own mini-game, with free throws piling up and set plays drawn up out of every timeout. In a matchup where both teams already lean offensive, that extended closing stretch becomes a pretty big deal for anyone watching the number. Put it together and you have two teams that want to run, that shoot it well enough to make pace hurt, and that are unlikely to suddenly reinvent themselves as slow, half-court grinders for one night. The more natural script here is a game where the scoreboard operator stays busy, where both sides enjoy their hot stretches, and where the style of play nudges things toward a higher scoring outcome rather than a tight lid on the rim. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.